so much for having me.
You're very welcome.
Well,
thank you very much for making the time to come over here.
Thank you. I think you hyped me up too much. There's a lot of experts in the audience, more so than me, especially. So
we will see about that. Okay. Usually we'd like to start from the beginning. Can you start the timer, Rashad? Thank you. We like to start from the beginning and know about your background. I understand you were born in Iran.
I was born in Abadan. So I think Dokhtar Abadani, at least for 6 months. And then my family moved to Tehran, and that's where I lived until we moved to the U.S.
And how old were you when you moved to the U.S.?
I was 9, and it was right before the revolution, so everyone can do a quick math and figure out exactly how old I am.
No, I was more trying to assess that, when you left Iran, you were 8, so the accumulation or the assimilation of Persian language that you had probably was limited.
It was. I can speak okay with a bit of an accent, and I write like a 3rd grader. So.
Oh, you do write in Persian?
I do.
Oh, that is impressive. You no doubt went to high school here in Minnesota?
Wisconsin.
Oh, Wisconsin.
Yeah. So when we moved from Iran, we settled in Madison, Wisconsin, of all places, because my dad had gone to school there in the 60s. And so he was familiar with the town, as I'm sure with a lot of immigrants, you tend to go to where you know.
Anybody went to school in Madison? I know a few people who did, yes.
Yay, go Badgers.
And you finished high school there?
And so I finished elementary school, high school, and then I moved to Philadelphia. So I went to a small women's college called Bryn Mawr, and I went there for undergrad. And then
what was your major?
Chemistry and French.
Chemistry and French.
So I really loved French. I had an amazing teacher in high school, and I wanted to study French. And originally the plan was, like with all Iranians, go to med school, because that's what my parents, you had to be an engineer or a doctor.
Yes.
And then when I went to college, my dad said, Negar, what are you going to do with a French major in case you don't go to medical school? And he's like, you should really do something else. And I loved chemistry. So then I decided to do the double major. Mm-hmm.
And what made you go into pharmaceutical? Because chemistry opens up a lot of different fields.
It does. I went, actually my junior year of college, I ended up going back to Madison, to Wisconsin, and I did a year there at home. Instead of going to France, I went back home. And there was a really great chemistry professor who I ended up working with.
What's his name?
Dr. Yu.
Mm-hmm.
Huck Yu is his name, and he's retired now, but he was just a lovely man. And I ended up doing some research with him, and he was the one that was working with my graduate school advisor in pharmaceutics, whose name was George Zagrafi, and he convinced me that I should not go into chemistry, but instead go into pharmaceutics. At the time, the jobs in the chemical field were not that great, and he didn't think that I was cut out for med school. He thought I would be better for research, and so he convinced me to go to grad school.
Excellent. And you are happy with your choice?
I love my decision, yeah.
Okay, so after you got your degree from
the school, yeah, so I applied to the School of Pharmacy, and it was a PhD in pharmaceutics.
Excellent, excellent. And then you went to the industry. What was your first job?
My first job was at Abbott in Chicago, and I was a formulation scientist. So I still call myself a scientist because that's what
because you are.
I am. Yeah. That's what I am at heart. And I started in the drug development, so I would say I make legal drugs. It was solid dosage forms and antibiotics.
So don't have requests about the other parts.
It was solid dosage forms, antibiotics, and also I was in the pilot plant. So in manufacturing, and that was it was a great experience. And then part of my job was also, I wanted to learn as much as possible, and as you can imagine, coming from grad school and being in the lab, I wanted to be back in the lab. So part-time, I was also helping out in the pre-formulation group, so doing actually all the testing on all the products that we were making.
So you got to know all the stages, or at least
the early
phase
stages
of
yeah.
Creating and testing a drug. Most recently, you've been at Genentech for 12 years,
12
years, 6 months, something like that.
12 years, yeah.
How has that trip shaped up for you? Why did you
Great.
go there, and what happened?
So I moved out to California 25 years ago, and I was working still in what did I say, the lab space, the R&D space. I came to join a company called Inhale Therapeutics, and they were developing inhalable insulin, and they were partnered with Pfizer. And it was near, and I have to say that a lot of the jobs I've taken, it's been because of some personal aspect to it. I think a lot of us that work in the pharmaceutical industry, what really drives us is really the patients, right? It's what we're delivering, the medicine that we're giving. And at the time, my dad is a diabetic, and at the time my dad was, giving himself insulin shots 3-4 times a day. And so Inhale Therapeutics was developing something that would make patients' life so much easier. It was an inhalation device. So imagine just like, for asthma, you would take an inhaler, same idea for controlling your diabetes. So I joined them, and I worked with them for about 10 years.
Your motivation was personal.
It was very personal. Yeah, it was very personal. And along the way, I was doing some regulatory work, right, but from a scientific perspective. So I was always in the chemistry portion, manufacturing, and I would have some interactions with the FDA, with EMA, things like that. And then my personal life was changing. I took about 6 months off, and I was deciding about what to do with my life when come back into the pharma tech sector. And somebody reached out to me and said, "Have you ever thought about technical regulatory?" And I said no, because up to then I'd never had any kind of interaction with a technical regulatory person. It had always been on the clinical side. And so then I became a contractor, actually. I started out as a contract position at Genentech. So I went from a field that I was, pretty senior in, and then I started out at the bottom again. So really, but for me, it was interesting. Within 2 weeks of being at Genentech, I knew, first of all, that's the right company for me, and I knew that technical regulatory was the right place to be.
Now, technical regulatory is it's a very hard job, the way I understand it, because the output of that one, correct me if I'm wrong, you have to produce containers and containers of paper, which are the results of the tests and the research that you have done for FDA to be able to go through them and approve them. This is pretty much close to that, right?
Right. So regulatory submission has a number of different pieces. One piece is all the clinical aspects, all the clinical studies that goes into it, preclinical, so toxicology, all of that. And then another aspect of it is the chemistry and manufacturing controls. So anything that you do to actually make the drug product, the active ingredient that goes into it, the drug product, all the excipients, anything else that you put into it.
Manufacturing process,
the manufacturing process and all of that. So the part that technical regulatory does is that manufacturing portion, the CMC portion of it. And then we also have a different department within Genentech that takes care of all the clinical, preclinical aspects of the submission.
And what made you particularly suited for that job? What made you shine in that job?
What made me shine? I don't know if I'm shining. I love.
It was a good match. You stayed there for 12 years.
It was a good match. I love technical regulatory because I can use my scientific knowledge but not be responsible for it. The job changes all the time, so we're looking at, it's not just one drug that I'm working on. We are looking at all different kinds of drugs.
Like how many?
Like how many? Oh, at any one point, I don't know. It's a lot, right?
Hundreds, thousands?
No, not thousands. Okay. But we're looking at it from end to end. So you have the early development stages. So anything that's going into phase 1, you're still responsible for that. We still have to submit some kind of information to the FDA so that they know, or EMA, or rest of the world, so that they know it's safe and efficacious, all the way up through what we end up marketing. So the job is constantly changing. Regulations are constantly evolving. So you really, it's never the same 2 days in a row.
But you have this unique vision of what is being prepared to come to your part for preparation for regulatory, and also what is making the way through the regulation traps that you're going to put over there, and what's going to happen like 10 years, 20 years from now. So I think that would be an interesting thing we can go through. How was the world about 20 years ago as far as the medications were concerned? And how has it changed at present? What do we have the advantage of? You know, I'm sure some of these technologies like CRISPRs or mRNA came in and facilitated that. And what are we looking at future, you know, past, present, and future? Shall we start with the past and you tell us like what was happening? Like you told us about your father and people like him, they had to take insulin shots, but they don't have to do it anymore. What are similar things?
I think now, honestly, there's so much more in terms of I would say the marriage between the device world and the drug world, right? So you're now using devices much more for deliveries than we were in the past. When I started out with Inhale, I think there was one other company in the Boston area that was doing something like we were doing, developing something for inhalation. Now, almost every single drug that we're developing, there's some kind of a device that's associated with it, right?
These are personal devices that people carry with them?
Or it's a combination product, right?
Okay.
You're selling it like that. So I think that's one thing that's changing. I think the way that we are actually discovering medicines is different now too. It's changed,
Also.
right? So you used to have, you would have chemists, right? Synthetic chemists, and they would synthesize in the lab, and they'd be great, and they'd do maybe a couple different, I don't know however many combinations of different syntheses that you would put together. Well, now with with AI, things can change, right? You can actually come up with
protein folding, for
right.
example.
You can come up with many. You still have the great scientists working in the lab, but you can come up with so many more combinations of things. So you have many more chances of getting a hit on a molecule than you did before. You might have, in the past, you might have had one backup, two backups, whatever. Now you're constantly producing variations of a product that you can actually try and get a hit on or make a target for.
And these variations that you are testing things on, are they created like randomly, or are there some guidelines that prunes the unnecessary?
Well, I mean, it depends on what you're trying to target, right?
I see. Protein folding is almost random.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to, I think it just depends on what, and I don't know that much about this field. I'm just about that portion of it because I'm not a synthetic chemist, but you know, I can imagine that it just depends on what you're targeting. But I think, you know, with the advent of AI, we can get much more out of it because you can feed it data.
Of course.
And you can feed it all of your past data. So, you know, it's many combinations. The synthetic chemist might have come up with, I don't know, 100, 500. But now with AI, you can maybe come up with billions of potential combinations that you could
and test them without taking them to the lab.
So you still have the lab component,
Yeah,
right?
but you don't have to do it right away because
Right.
a lot of information you can get about it
Right.
with simulation. I know one field that has changed, I hear from my friends, is the field of treating allergies. That has made drastic changes over the past 20, 30 years. There are a lot more solutions for people who were absolutely miserable about 20, 30 years ago. Do you think we are going to have personalized medicine?
Absolutely.
And what would that mean? I use the word, but I want you to define it for me. How would I personalize it?
So I think it's targeting what you need in your body, right?
Based on DNA or?
I think it's based on the antibodies that you're producing in your body, right? And so it would be targeting that.
So it's much easier than sequencing the whole thing. Okay.
That's my personal, I don't know if I'm right or not, but that's my personal view.
In our brief chat we had before, we talked about some of the cancer cases that are more successfully treated. What are those, if you can recall some of them?
So the oncology is a big part of GENENTECH. One of the things that that we have out in the market that I personally worked on was a small cell lung cancer, Alecensa. That one is near and dear to my heart, mostly because I worked on that product. We also have things for colorectal cancer, lymphoma. There's many. I'm sure I can't remember all of them, but there's breast cancer is really prevalent. I think that's one that is probably the most prevalent in our company. But yeah.
So are there drugs that are curing every single breast cancer, or is it for cases?
No, it's targeted.
It's targeted.
It's
Targeted for
targeted.
person, for classes of breast cancer.
No, it's for classes. It's not a person.
Okay.
Yeah.
So our success rate is, would you say, is overall for breast cancer 50%, 30%, 20%?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know.
I don't want to.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it just depends on.
Okay.
I don't know what the success rate is, but definitely, I mean, one of our missions is to find cures for cancer.
Yes.
Right.
But what method to use? How about mRNA? We had, recent success with COVID vaccine for that.
Mm-hmm.
Is that promising, and does it affect your area to have more drugs faster sent to the market?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things we saw with the whole pandemic was the different agencies working together. There was much more faster approval of products.
We were lucky.
We were lucky. There was much more faster of approval of drugs. There was faster review of things. And I think one of the things that's come out of it is trying to leverage that and see why we can't continue that way. Why do we have to wait years for something to get approved? Is there a way that we can streamline it like we did during the pandemic, and can we do the same now?
This is not necessarily having a shortcut and losing some of the safety that we are having, because mRNA works entirely different from the previous process of testing the...
It's not about shortcuts, because at the end of the day, you still have to make sure it's safe and it works, right? And a lot of these drugs are not things that you just take once and you're done. They're for treating chronic diseases, right? So you're taking it maybe over a lifetime, maybe not the cancer drugs, but definitely things like for neurology or inflammation or infectious disease, right? So some of those might be more chronic. And so you want to make sure that they're safe to take over long periods of time.
Let's switch gears for the future. What is your optimism and what is your vision of what's going to happen in 20, 30, 40 years from now, as far as the drug?
Yeah, I mean, I think hopefully it'll be more personalized, right? Personalized care, where you're targeting what each person's needs might be. I think in terms of PTR and my department, hopefully things will, in terms of AI, we can use things a little bit more effectively. Yeah, and maybe better collaboration between companies and between health authorities.
So you think we are going to have similar kind of drugs but more effective, or are we going to have device dependent when we are administering these drugs? Or how is the phase?
I think it's going to be a combination, right? I think we're seeing more and more cell and gene therapies. One of the things that I'm seeing is a lot more collaboration with smaller companies, right? Smaller, innovative companies are coming up with new ways, whatever it may be, and the bigger pharmas are leveraging that, right? There's much more partnerships, more collaborations, not necessarily buyouts, but really true partnerships. And I think we're going to see more of that, where maybe these smaller companies are a little bit more innovative than the larger pharmas.
Smaller companies reminds me of a comment I heard recently, and I want you to comment on this one. There are too many early seed level companies that are working on a biotechnology and biotech issues. Have you heard that? Have you sensed that? That there are too many, competitors after just a few spots?
I don't know if I've heard that. I mean, there's a lot of money in it, right? So there's a lot of money.
So anybody with a little product can sell it to Genentech for millions of dollars.
Well, I don't know if
you don't want to commit to that.
I don't want to
but it's okay.
commit to that.
So do you think the scene of early seed companies are crowded?
Yeah, probably. But I think, out of all those seed companies, maybe only a few hits, right? I don't know what the percentage is of success.
And how do you
right?
define who's going to hit, who's going to?
Well, I think
Is it gonna be
I
on
think you're
person or-
looking. I think you're looking at it. You look at it from end to end, right? You're not just looking at, oh, did they make that first phase 1 clinical study? Is there a potential for more? Is it a platform? In other words, is there a potential for multiple drugs to come out of it as opposed to just the one-hit wonder, right? Because you don't want a one-hit wonder. So I think those are all things to look at. You also look and see, does it fit from a company like GENENTECH's perspective? Does it fit into our portfolio? Does it fit into our business, what we're trying to do and where we're trying to go? We definitely are looking at unmet patient need as well. So there's some drugs that we have that don't target a huge patient population, but there's a real need for it. So we're really looking at those kinds of things.
Do you have an example of those?
Yeah, example is Evrysdi, which is for muscular atrophy, spinal muscular atrophy, and that one is definitely a really small patient population.
Like 1%?
Oh, I don't know.
About. Less than 1%?
No, no, but definitely less than 5. I would say
Okay.
less than 5. It's very small.
But it's notable.
And
yeah.
it hits people even at children, right? So this is something that's not just for adults, but it's also for children. So we're definitely not just going for the big market, big dollar amounts of money. We are looking at really things that would make an impact to people's lives.
We GENENTECH.
Sorry,
this
we
is-
GENENTECH.
No. This is important because ultimately it's a business, and if it filters out some of the needs of people without money, then we are not doing the service.
No, and one of the things you asked me was about why I felt like GENENTECH was the right company.
Yes.
Really, they care about the patient. I know it's a business, but at the end of the day, everyone's focus is on the patients, and we're reminded of that all the time. Whether we're bringing in patients to talk about, their experiences, their diseases, their, what they've gleaned out of the medication, or just the reminder at the end of the day when we get something to the market, even phase 1, we get a first patient in, there's always a little celebration. Hey, look, we got this to the patient. It's for, So I think that was something that was really near and dear to my heart.
It's in the DNA of a company. No pun intended.
Yeah.
Some of the people who are working on early stage biotech company are sitting in the audience, and if you were to advise them on anything, what would that be? As far as the work ethics or evaluating their companies, or have you ever worked for an early stage company?
I guess Inhale was the closest one.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a.
What was your valuable experience that these people can use?
Well, I think depending on what the size of the company is, when I was at Inhale, I definitely what I would call changing jobs every few years. I wore many different hats, right? Which is a benefit of being in a small company. You get to experience a lot of different things, right?
Did you initiate that, or that was part of the company's?
No, I don't know if I initiated it or it just kind of fell in my lap. I've always been a little bit, I would say I've always been a little bit lucky, maybe a little bit blessed that way. But I've always also been open to it, right? To try different things. Not so much caring as to the level of the work, but just really doing the work and understanding what the work is, right?
Know the details, yes.
Yeah, I mean, whether it was being in the lab and running HPLC assays all day, or being going to contract manufacturers and doing an audit, right? So I think that was really valuable for me personally, right? To be able to see all the different aspects and to experience it and to learn. And I like that. I like doing the kind of what I call the more hands-on work. So I think if you're working at that kind of a company, I think it's also important to get an idea of what it means for your company, for you to be end-to-end. When you're sitting on a project team, if you hear someone talking about something at an early stage, I don't know, at the preclinical stage, and you're thinking to yourself, you know what, this is going to have an impact down the road, speak up, say something. Don't be shy about that, because I think it's really important to have that end-to-end vision, to kind of be thinking about it, and don't just kind of focus on just one
Just
scope.
your narrow job in the company. Yes.
I don't know if that answered your question.
They will ask you questions if you haven't answered them. I have so many, but in the limited time, I want to just ask a few that I think are important. Your challenges, current or during your career, can you share some of them with us? Your biggest challenges.
Honestly, I think it's just maybe as a woman, it was challenging.
That was my next question.
Yeah, okay, but I'll say that as a woman, it was challenging. I started out, maybe it's not as tough as the tech field, right? But there were still not that many women scientists. When I started at Abbott, I was young, but I was starting out as a scientist. And I remember when my boss was taking me around, everyone thought I was the new admin. There is nothing wrong with being an administrative assistant. I just want to say that out there. But as a scientist, it was kind of shocking for people to just make that assumption. And then there were many other challenges along the way. So I think that was one. But I've always been lucky to have had mentors. I think that was the one thing that I would say helped tremendously, was to have somebody that believed in you and also kind of guided you and said, okay, maybe have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? I think right now my biggest challenge is a new role, a leadership role, which I hadn't been in before. So trying to, what I call, figure out the lay of the land, and at the same time learn, but at the same time be able to exert what I would like to see happen. And kind of shape and guide the team and see where that, to go where I would like it to go. And I think just honestly not getting in my own way. Sometimes I think you're your worst enemy, right? You sabotage yourself.
That's where the mentor comes in.
Yes.
Tell us about the mentors that you've had and how did you find them?
So first of all, I think I've just had really good role models in my life, right? Starting with my own parents, especially my mom. I just want to give a big shout out to my mom. But also others. Like I feel like I've been really lucky to be surrounded by a lot of really strong Iranians, right? Who I count as my aunts and uncles. And one example is برای, who's sitting in the audience. She's an amazing role model. And I think starting out with that, I think that was really important, having that. So having a basis that you're like, okay, this is what I have to kind of achieve. This is what I have to live up to. But I think when I worked at Inhale, my VP of R&D they started a mentorship program, and and I was lucky enough to have him as my mentor. And he really encouraged me to do things that I would never have thought about doing and taking on. So we had a research committee that was composed of senior leaders within the company, and during my 10 years there, we went from a small company to a mid-sized company, and so we had our own funding, and we would fund internal research projects, and this committee would actually evaluate people's proposals, and we would then pick a certain number and fund it internally for work. And so he really encouraged me to actually take on the lead role on that committee, which I would never have thought about doing. But because of that, I got exposed to a lot of different people within the company, a lot of different ideas, and it was interesting. It was a leadership role, but not in a traditional sense of a leadership role. And I got visibility to senior leaders. So I think that was really, it was a nice thing to do, but at the same time, not necessarily something that was in my everyday job, in my everyday field.
That mentorship experience, no doubt, gave you so much that propelled you forward in your career. Did you repeat that process, not knowing that being a mentee is good for you? Did you go and seek for it in later on in other parts in your career?
I did, but not necessarily within the company. So one of the things that I did was just have people outside, connections outside, right, at other companies. How did you do that?
How did you find out?
So some of it was just through either people I've known from grad school who have gotten to other different types of positions. Some of it was just from making connections whether it was at conferences or I don't know, training courses, things like that.
I would like to format that, the way I'm asking the question. The question is really, if any of these people in the audience would like to energize their career, and based on your advice, they would like to find a mentor, how would they do that? Where do they go for it?
So first, start at your own company, right? So I think that's important. Like GENENTECH has a formal mentorship program, which I actually participate in. It's a great way to network within your own company and meet people. I think also there's so many avenues. There's LinkedIn, right? Actually, ever since this advertisement came out for tonight, I've had so many new connections on LinkedIn, which I appreciate. I love that. So I think that's another way. I think through conferences, be open to meeting people and networking. I think that's always a good thing. I'm not necessarily the best networker. I am actually a little bit shy. I know. And
but networking is good,
but
and you should overcome that shyness.
Yeah, it's good. Get over your shyness. I think also through your friends. One of the other things I was going to say that I've done at work is there's a group, there's 4 of us, 4 women at GENENTECH, and we're all in different areas. We actually meet once a month for coffee, and we talk to each other about our work and what we're doing. And it's just another way for someone other than yourself, like if you're shy about promoting yourself, which a lot of us are, it's a way for someone else to talk about you and to promote you in different areas of the company, right? So your name gets out a little bit. So people hear and they say, oh, I just heard that Saeed was working on this, and it's so fabulous, it's wonderful. Have you thought about connecting with him? So I think that's another way to do it.
We talked a little bit about your personal life, and I know you have a son. How old? What does he do?
His name is Alex, and he is 15. He's a freshman at St. Francis High School, just a local high school for us. And he swims and plays basketball. He just made, I'm going to brag. I can brag about my son. He just made the high honor roll this semester, so I was very proud of him. So. Yeah.
And you are, and your husband is the role models.
I'm a single mom.
So you're a single mom. Okay.
Single mom. But yes, Alex's dad is a role model for him, I'm sure.
And one passion that you share with him?
Basketball. Basketball. We're huge basketball fans, huge Warriors fans. And we've actually followed, I'm embarrassed or proud to say, I don't know which one, we've actually followed them around to different places. So we've gone to Portland, we've gone to Colorado, we've gone to LA, we've gone a little bit everywhere. So.
And also you've been at the courtside at least once.
Once. We did that when he turned 13. We sat courtside, and that was quite an he sat courtside. I sat a little bit back.
Oh, I see. Okay. And who's
I couldn't afford the 2 seats on the courtside seats.
And who's your basketball hero over there? You told me what.
Yeah, so my son's is Steph Curry, but mine is GP2, so Gary Payton.
Excellent. Excellent. Very good. Well, thank you very much. I would like to open the floor for some of the questions that I hope some people have over here. If you have a question, raise your hand, and we will have microphone for Farhad, please. Please state your name and your affiliation before you're posing a question. And remember, you pose a question. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, my name is Farhad. Thank you very much for the conversation. I'm a co-founder of a medtech company in personalized health. My other co-founder is here. So I want to ask the question about the regulatory affairs that you have your hands on. There are a lot of conversations about over-regulation and deregulation, but usually these are from people who are not, in my view, experts of the field. So I want to take this opportunity to ask what you think are the aspects of these two features, and what are the dangers, what are the benefits. This was briefly discussed, but I want to go a little bit deeper. Thank you.
So so the 2 biggest markets it's FDA and EMA, right? So if you think about that, although I would have to say that China's coming pretty close in there now. I don't know if I believe in over-regulate, to be honest with you, over-regulate. I do believe in partnership with the with regulatory agencies. I think we're getting, you know, right now I would say from a Genentech perspective, from what I'm seeing in technical regulatory, we are getting a lot more questions. We get a lot more, even at phase 1, right, where you can see they're actually anticipating maybe something that's going to come in phase 2 or phase 3. They're thinking down the road. So that's why I think that end-to-end thinking is really critical. I think the one thing I would always say is think about it from the perspective of a regulatory agency, right? What they're looking for in your package and whatever you're presenting to them is it safe? And can you prove that it's efficacious? Can you make it each time, you know, the same way each time? Can you reproduce it? And I think sometimes some of the questions that they tend to ask you, maybe they're seeing something in another product from another company that you're not aware of. And so they're coming at you and asking you this question because they're anticipating maybe something that could happen because of what they've experienced. So I think always the dialogue is a good approach to take with the agencies. I don't know if that answers your question. You can say no, it doesn't, and I can talk more. I do feel though that you know, one of the things that we're also seeing is that the agencies are talking to each other more. So we've had experiences where, for example, we anticipate a risk or some question that maybe the FDA will ask, they ask it, and then you see the same thing coming from Canada. And you can tell that there's been dialogue, there's been a conversation, or you can see the same thing being asked by EMA. And a lot of times we've had in the past where they've come back and they've said to us, one agency has said, we'd like you to do X, Y, and Z for the market. And another agency will come and say, hey, we know you're doing this for them. We want to see the same thing.
Next question goes to the gentleman over here, second row.
Hi, my name is Majid. I work at Google.
Use the microphone. We don't hear you.
Hello?
No, yeah.
Okay. My name is Majid. I work at Google DeepMind. I have a question maybe generically about pharmaceutical companies. You mentioned that for you personally, your interest in inhale was personal, right, because of your dad's diabetes. How do companies, like large businesses, prioritize drug discovery? And the context for this question is I heard from Bill Gates in an interview that there's a lot more investment in drugs and prevention of baldness than malaria. And that's because a lot of rich people get bald, but they don't get malaria. Other than monetary incentives, like what other criteria do companies use to prioritize drug discovery?
Yeah, I think I don't know if I can answer. I don't know if I can answer it properly, but I think, you know, from what I've seen from Roche and Genentech, it is really looking at unmet medical need, right? So we do look and see where is our portfolio in, right? What is it that we're doing? Genentech started out historically as an oncology company, right? We had oncology products, and then with the buyout from Roche, it really went into much more broader area. Right now, one of the areas that we're looking at is cardiovascular disease, right? That's become huge for us, as well as metabolism. So we are looking to see where it's not just about money. We are also going into rest of the world countries, right? We're looking at other areas than what I would call big markets like China or the US or Europe. And I think that's also where we're looking at to see what are some of those unmet medical needs. That's the best way I can answer it.
Gentleman in front.
Thank you. Good presentation, good talk. My name is Kalev Kask. I'm a biotech entrepreneur scientist. I haven't worked for Genentech, but I've had the pleasure of working with Genentech. My postdoc advisor was a founding scientist of Genentech, so he's the reason why UCSF has the campus. But my question is, the word out there was that Genentech closed the cancer research part. Ira Mellman is gone, or Genentech having been the leader of the cancer space, in particular in the research part. Can you elaborate or give us a sort of a perspective of what that means? Firstly, what actually happened 6 months ago or so when that was in the news. The Ira Melman is gone, right? He was head of, but does that mean that maybe the cancer drugs that you guys have developed and a lot of other players who've developed checkpoint inhibitors, that the standard of care has become kind of a good enough, and that sometimes it's hard to beat, in particular regulatory-wise, the level that these drugs have reached? Is there a sense of that in the market or drug development? So that would be my question.
Yeah, no, we're still very much involved in oncology. It's very much what I would call a big portion of our product portfolio is the oncology, and it continues to be, even in the R&D space, especially at Genentech, right, with GRET development. So the way, and maybe I'll just explain a little bit. So the way with the acquisition with Roche, the way that we still have at Genentech, we still have a R&D division. So Roche has theirs as well. We have ours as well. So there's kind of but oncology is still a big part of our product portfolio and continues to be.
Next question, gentleman up front.
Hi, Negar. This is Monish here. First of all, thanks so much for coming here and speaking to us, all of us. Your title gives me a little bit of an anxiety attack.
Me too.
So we were talking about time. We're talking about your career over the years, and just like 15 years back or so, my first job, I was literally taking these documents. I was in Becton Dickinson, then went to Pfizer, but now I'm a founder in tech, far away from all of that. But I remember running to compliance and regulatory, taking these SOPs and all of these different documents, literally running around trying to get these things signed. And I would always fear the compliance department. Right? And it's always a scary department. But I'd actually love to lean into that with you just a little bit, and just to understand over
what
the last...
What is compliance?
Well, yeah, how has the last 12 years changed? And then, when you look at AI, when you look at your job now, what are parts of that you wish, AI would just take away? Yeah. And what are parts of that you want to preserve?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, this is a new department or division or title, I don't know what you want to call it, within PTR. And I wasn't doing this the whole time in PTR. So I wasn't regulatory, but there was no compliance aspect to my job. So on the compliance side of it, a lot of what my group is dealing with are things like if we have drug shortages, for example, things like that, right? That's where the compliance part of it is. We also do a lot with the sites, with the manufacturing sites in terms of inspections and audits. When health authorities come in and do those audits, so we're also involved in those. So that's the compliance part. In terms of AI, we're just starting. I would say within PTR, we're just starting incorporating things like intelligent authoring, which is something I would love to see happen much faster. I'm sure, from the subject matter expert perspective, like who wants to transcribe data from reports into these regulatory dossiers, right? Into the regulatory dossiers. No one wants to do that. So I love to see intelligent authoring come in even faster than it is. From a system perspective, we actually are using new systems that enable us, because as you can imagine, we have a lot of affiliates, right? So when we submit a dossier, for example, and it goes to, I don't know, Brazil, right? We're using our Brazilian affiliate. We send them the core dossier, and then they actually take portions of it and do whatever they need to do for Brazil to meet the Brazilian requirements. And before, we didn't necessarily have visibility to everything that was going on. When was it being submitted? What was actually being submitted? Things like that. Things that are really important from a traceability perspective. And now we have new systems in place that are a little bit more cumbersome, I would say, at the beginning, just for folks to get used to them. But we get much more of that traceability. And along with these systems, also the other part of the compliance that comes in is that we're making sure that the data that we're submitting is the right data, right? So.
Thank you. There are two questions over there, and I think, well, Nima has a question here. We'll go ahead. We will have time for two more.
Okay, Negar, I'll make it quick. Thank you so much. First of all, I don't know why you say you're shy. You're extremely likable and relatable. So thank you for sharing that. I want to take a quick step back, a few years back. In your role, you are the expert in making sure product is safe and it fit for purpose, right? So not getting into the rhetoric that is happening on the politics, but let's go back during COVID era, right? And tell us what went wrong, what should they have done, and what would you have done if you were in that role at the people who approve all those vaccines to go that has been proved that to be not safe, not fit for purpose. So do you think that they went through the right compliance? Would you have done it differently?
You're talking about COVID vaccine or other vaccines?
COVID.
COVID, okay.
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know if I can answer that question, to be honest with you.
You weren't part of that process.
Yeah.
There's another gentleman over there who raised his hand before we go to Nima. Oh, we have two more. But we may not get to all the questions. Oh, that gentleman over there.
Do you hear me? Okay. Hossein Kuhani from Amazon. I have a quick question. I want to hear your vision about preventative health and gene sequencing. So how far are we from a day that, from the day a baby is born, basically you can sequence their genome and start developing drugs and supplements to enhance their life? Like, do you have a vision on that?
I'm sorry, I don't. Although we're doing cell and gene therapy within Genentech, it's actually something that's really a bit removed from my area of expertise. I apologize. I can't answer that question.
That's okay. That's okay. We have first Nima. Yes.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mani. All the time, this mistake happens.
What?
I'm sorry.
I transpose your name again.
Yeah, 3 weeks I didn't came to hike, so you forget me very fast.
Touche.
So I'm business partner in catering of Persian kebabs, and I promise next time we will have warm kebab here instead of pizza. This is the first thing.
That advertisement will cost you. Okay.
And I have a question about that mentorship you said. Was it official, for example, one time a week, for example? And if we do that, what is the expectation from the mentor? If you can say, for example, in some bullet points that after 6 months, how they can help us. Yeah, it's very important. Thank you.
Yeah, so the mentorship I had at Inhale was an official program, right? So it was, and it was, I think Dave and I were meeting once every couple of weeks to talk about things. He'd asked me to set clear goals of what I was looking for and what I wanted to get out of it. Yeah, I think it's personal to everyone. I think the biggest thing that I liked about that program at Inhale was that we had access to senior leaders where you don't usually get that kind of access, right? And that was the nice part of it, that you get the benefit of their experience and, yeah.
Okay, there are two more questions we already promised. So Sunny, go through that one quickly, and then you will have the last question. Yeah.
Sure. Hi, I'm Sunny. I'm a CEO and co-founder of AI health tech startup. First of all, thank you so much for the great presentation. My question is that what do you think is going to be the biggest challenge of compliance and regulations in medical field that you predict that medical field is going to face in the next 2-3 years? What do you think is the biggest thing to apply regulations and regulations and compliance to it in general, or as much as you see?
I think the changing regulations is the biggest. I think is the biggest challenge, right? Things are things are changing quick. Like I would say quickly, I think the expectation from the regulatory agencies is that the companies comply with these changes, right, within a certain time frame. So for just one example, and I just say it because it's it's at the top of my mind, but the FDA just came out saying that this type of dye that's used in capsules can no longer be used. So that's a huge thing, right? So, and they're asking us to make changes by 2028. I know it's not AI related, but I think this is it's things like that, you know, whether it's because it's no longer safe, for whatever reason that there's been a change, but it's a huge impact on how we do our business, right? So that's one thing. And I think just in general, so for some of the products, like for example, you know, some of the obesity drugs, right? I think the biggest thing is capacity, drug shortages, right? How can we anticipate those? Anyone who's on Ozempic or any of the other ones, right? You constantly are hearing about shortage, right? And so the manufacturing capacity, can we keep up with it? We even have run into drug shortage problems just on other types of drugs, right? It doesn't have to be on the obesity ones. So I think it's trying to see whether there's any way that we can prevent those kinds of things from happening, and whether we can use AI to make those kinds of predictions and prevent those, right?
And the last question goes to the lady over there.
Yeah, my name is Rehana. I come from a AI startup from Wisconsin. And I'm not sure if the question I'm going to ask is a little bit deviates from your expertise, but I ask it anyways. You can ignore it if it doesn't make sense. But I'm thinking, you know, during the time that you were working in Inhale company, that you said it was a small company and then it turned to a mid-sized company, I'm thinking, have you, given your expertise, have you ever involved with, you know, stuff that were related to marketing? Did you ever, you know, do you have any, you know, advice for AI companies who are targeting, you know, biotech, you know, companies in terms of, you know, marketing or finding product market fit? Do you have any advice for them?
I don't have any experience in that. I'm so sorry.
No worries.
Well, with that, that was the last question, but Negar is going to be here at least for a few minutes to answer some of your questions. Negar, I would like to thank you very much for making the time on behalf of Plug and Play, the AmidiGroup, Persian Tech Network, and the Iranian community. I would like to thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Thank you.